What if the biggest trade partnership in the world is just 6 months away from collapse? This isn't about minor policy tweaks. This is about the complete reordering of power across a continent, and it all hinges on a single explosive threat. Earlier today, the U.S. president declared he would slap a 100% tariff, that's a full doubling of price, on every single product entering America from Canada. The stated reason? Canada's new trade agreement with China. But if you think this is just another tariff headline, you need to stick with me, because the real story is what this threat reveals about a fundamental fracture happening right now. The next half year will decide the fate of the entire North American Economic Alliance. Let's rewind. 1 week ago, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was in Beijing. It was the first visit by a Canadian leader to China in nearly a decade. Years defined by diplomatic freezes and retaliatory taxes. The outcome was a deal. Canada agreed to allow 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into its market annually at a reduced tariff. In return, China will dramatically cut its punishing tariffs on Canadian canola and eliminate them on key seafood exports. To farmers in Western Canada, this is a lifeline. To the auto sector in Ontario, it's a major concern. But to the leadership in Washington, it's seen as something far more provocative, a direct challenge. Why would a deal focused on canola and cars trigger such an extreme reaction? The answer lies not in Beijing, but in a conference room in Davos. Just days after signing the China deal, Prime Minister Carney took the stage at the World Economic Forum. To a room of global elites, he delivered a speech that became an instant flashpoint. He spoke of a rupture in the world order, of middle powers needing to stick together, because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. The speech, widely interpreted as a rebuttal to American strategy, earned a standing ovation. The next day, the U.S. president responded, asserting that Canada lives because of the United States. Carney fired back. Canada thrives because it is Canadian. The diplomatic gloves were off. So, is this just a clash of egos? A simple story of retaliation for a speech? That's where almost every analysis gets it wrong. The true trigger point is a date, July 1st, 2026. That is when the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the USMCA, faces its mandatory 6-year review. This treaty governs over $2 trillion in annual trade. This review has been on the calendar since it was signed, but it's no longer a routine checkup. It has become an existential negotiation. And the 100% tariff threat? That's the opening move. It's leverage. The U.S. aim is to force Canada and Mexico into a new alignment, specifically to lock their trade policies with China to America's own restrictive stance. The fear in Washington is that Canada could become a drop-off port, a backdoor for Chinese goods to enter the U.S. market tariff-free. But let's examine that Canadian deal with China more closely. What does it actually do? The 49,000 electric vehicle quota essentially returns imports to pre-tariff war levels. It's not an open floodgate. Crucially, these vehicles are for Canada. To enter the U.S. duty-free under USMCA rules, a vehicle must have 75% of its value made in North America. A car built in China doesn't qualify. So, is the backdoor theory real? Evidence is mixed. Studies note increased Chinese investment in Mexican and Canadian factories in sectors facing U.S. tariffs. But supply chains are complex. The administration's view is simpler. A pattern of Chinese investment rising where U.S. tariffs are high is evidence enough. Canada's deal is seen as the first crack in a unified North American front. Here's the critical shift. Canada isn't pivoting to China out of preference, it's pivoting out of necessity. When your largest trading partner, which takes 75% of your exports, repeatedly threatens your economic stability with tariffs and questions your sovereignty, you have no choice but to diversify. This is a story of an alliance pushed to find alternatives. That's the word Carney uses, diversification. The goal is to increase exports to China by 50% before 2030. If Canada succeeds in building robust alternative markets, the ultimate source of American leverage, the threat of cutting off access loses its power. This is the high-stakes game unfolding. So, is this tariff threat a real danger or a negotiating bluff? The legal pathway for the president to impose such tariffs using emergency economic powers has so far survived court challenges. He likely can do it. But would he? The economic damage would be mutual and severe. Canada is the top export destination for 36 U.S. states. Nearly $3 billion in goods cross the border every single day. The U.S. relies on Canada for most of its imported crude oil, electricity, and critical minerals. Doubling the cost of these imports would shock American supply chains, from auto plants to refineries, potentially triggering a recession. Analysis suggests existing tariffs already cost the average U.S. household about $1,000 more per year. A 100% tariff on Canada would send that cost soaring. This forces a pivotal question. Who blinks first? The U.S. holds greater economic size, but Canada, under Carney, has made a strategic calculation that the long-term cost of submission, ceding sovereignty over its trade policy, is higher than the short-term pain of a trade war. He is betting that American businesses and voters harmed by skyrocketing costs will pressure the administration to stand down. It's a dangerous gamble. The entire Western Hemisphere is watching. Mexico is watching. European and Asian allies are watching. They are all asking, if America is willing to do this to its closest partner, what would it do to us? This crisis is about more than tariffs. It's about which currency matters more, rules or raw power. What happens next? Watch Canada's official response. Does it back down or hold firm? Watch the preliminary talks for the USMCA review. The U.S. will demand tighter rules to prevent Chinese materials from qualifying for duty-free treatment. Canada and Mexico will seek sovereignty and stability. If positions don't move, the July meeting could be where the unthinkable happens, the managed unraveling of a trillion-dollar economic zone. These deeply integrated supply chains, where parts cross borders multiple times during manufacturing, can't be rebuilt overnight. A rupture would mean shuttered factories and lost jobs on all sides of the border. We are 6 months from a decision that will redefine North America. 2 leaders have staked public positions from which they cannot easily retreat. A 100% tariff sword hangs in the air. Underneath it all is a fundamental test. Can a partnership of democracies survive when one partner demands obedience instead of collaboration? The next chapter is being written right now. If you want to follow every twist in this high-stakes showdown, make sure you're subscribed. This story is accelerating, and I'll be here to break down each new development. But before you go, I want to hear from you. Hit the like button if this deep dive helped you see the real stakes behind the headlines. It directly supports this channel, Winds of Thought, and helps us deliver more content like this. And in the comments below, give me your prediction. Do you think Prime Minister Carney will hold his ground, or will the economic pressure force Canada to bend? Your insight matters. Thanks for watching.